Everyone. I'm glad you could join us today for our Sunday school lesson. Our lesson today is going to be dinner and fishing with Jesus. But before we go into that, I want to remind you all that last week was Resurrection Sunday, so we talked about Jesus being resurrected, and this lesson will pick up with Jesus making a couple of visits to some people after he was resurrected and before he ascended into heaven with God. But before we get started, I want to do some introductions and thank you. Our family got an Easter card from someone in Sunday school, and I wanted to thank Miss Martha for making that happen, and to the person who sent it to us. Unfortunately, it wasn't signed, and there was no return address, so I don't know who sent it. But if it was you, thank you very much. You know, I like to do a little icebreaker and introduction, and I've been thinking about what we could do as an icebreaker today, and I'm running out of ideas, to be perfectly honest, so I thought, tell me the worst joke that you know. All right, so I'm going to introduce myself. My name is Kelly, and this is the worst joke that I know. It's probably the oldest joke that I know, too. All right, so here we go. Why did the man tiptoe into the bathroom? Why did the man tiptoe into the bathroom? He didn't want to wake the sleeping pills. All right, your turn now. Okay, those were some fantastic jokes. And let's get on with our lesson, dinner and fishing with Jesus. I want to warn you, this is a little bit longer lesson than some of the lessons that we've had before. But I want to go ahead and get started. There's going to be quite a bit of reading. And again, we have two stories taken from two different gospels. So we have the Gospel of Luke 24:13 through 31, and that's about dinner with Jesus. And then there's fishing with Jesus that comes from John 21:1 through 10. All right, and as always, I'm going to read this time because I'm the only one here. But if you don't want to listen to me read, just pause the video, go ahead and do the reading yourself, and then fast forward to the next slide. All right, so here we go. Luke 24:13 through 17. Now that day, two of them were going to a village called Emmaus, around 7 miles from Jerusalem. They were talking with each other about everything that happened. As they talked and discussed these things with each other, Jesus himself came up and walked along with them, but they were kept from recognizing him. He asked them, "What are you discussing together as you walk along?" They stood still, their faces downcast. One of them, named Cleopas, asked him, "Are you the only one visiting from Jerusalem who does not know the things that have happened there in the days?" "What things?" he asked. All right, and now, as always, I like to do some questions to keep this a little bit interactive. So we'll go to the question slide. First question. What were the two men talking about as they walked the road to Emmaus? They were talking about Jesus of Nazareth, his trial, crucifixion, and the resurrection. Those were the things that had happened and that they were talking about. Second question. Who did the men think Jesus was? That's right. They thought he was a visitor from Jerusalem. All right, next slide. We pick up with our story in Luke 24:19 through 27. About Jesus of Nazareth, they replied, he was a prophet, powerful in the word and deed before God and all the people. The chief priests and our rulers handed him over to be sentenced to death, and they crucified him. But we had hoped that he was the one who was going to redeem Israel. And what is more, it is the third day since it all took place. In addition, some of the women amazed us. They went to the tomb early this morning, but they didn't find his body. They came and told us that they had seen a vision of angels who said he was alive. Then some of our companions went to the tomb and found it just as the women said, but they did not see Jesus. He said to them, "How foolish you are, and how slow to believe all that the prophets have spoken. Did not the Messiah have to suffer these things and enter his glory?" And beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he explained to them what was said in all the scriptures concerning himself. All right, we got some more questions here. First question, what did Jesus say to the men when they told him what they were thinking about? He told them how foolish they were and how slow they were to believe. And what did Jesus teach the men as they walked? What was said in the scriptures concerning himself? Now, as they approached the village to which they were going, Jesus continued on as if he were going further, but they urged him strongly, "Stay with us, for it's nearly evening. The day's almost over." So he went to stay with them. When he was at the table with them, he took bread, gave thanks, broke it, and began to give it to them. Then their eyes opened and they recognized him, and he disappeared from their sight. They asked each other, "Weren't our hearts burning within us while he talked to us on the road and opened the scriptures to us?" All right, some more questions here. What did Jesus do when the men asked him to stay with them? He agreed and he had dinner with them. What happened when Jesus gave thanks and broke bread to the men? And what did it say happened? Their eyes were open and they recognized Jesus. When Jesus disappeared, what did the men say about Jesus' teaching? Their hearts were burning as he opened the scriptures to them. Then they got up and returned at once to Jerusalem. They found the 11 and those with them assembled together and said, "It is true, the Lord has risen and has appeared to Simon." Then the two told what happened on the way and how Jesus was recognized by them when he broke the bread. All right. So what did the men do when Jesus disappeared? They went immediately to Jerusalem to tell the apostles. And what did they say to the apostles? "It is true, the Lord has risen and has appeared to Simon." And then they went on to tell the story of breaking the bread and how they had met Jesus along the road and all the things that he had told them. All right, so that's our first story about dinner with Jesus. Now we're going to go to the second story about fishing with Jesus. And I really feel for the apostles here because this is the way it happens when I fish. It says, afterwards, Jesus appeared again to his disciples by the Sea of Galilee. It happened this way. Simon Peter, Thomas, also known as Didymus, Nathanael from Cana in Galilee, the sons of Zebedee, and two other disciples were together. "I'm going out to fish," Simon Peter told them. And they said, "We'll go with you." So they went out and got into the boat, but that night they caught nothing. Man, do I know about that in fishing. Every time I go fishing, I catch nothing. Early in the morning, Jesus stood on the shore, but the disciples did not realize that it was Jesus. He called out to them, "Hey, friends, haven't you any fish?" "No," they answered. All right, we got some questions about this part of this story, and this is from John chapter 21, the first 14 chapters. How many disciples went fishing? So you'll have to do a little bit of counting or a little bit of math. I'm sorry I didn't tell you there was any math involved here. That was a dirty trick. But how many disciples went fishing? 7. And how many fish did they catch that night? 0. Zip. Zilch. Nada. Nary a fish was caught by those cats. They fished just like me. And now John 21, 6 through 9. So he said, "Throw your net to the right side of the boat and you will find some." When they did, they were unable to haul in the net because of the large number of fish. Then the disciple whom Jesus loved said to Peter, "It is the Lord." As soon as Simon Peter heard him say, "It is the Lord," he wrapped his outer garment around him, for he had taken it off, and jumped into the water. The other disciples followed in the boat, towing the net full of fish, for they were not far from shore, about 100 yards. When they landed, they saw a fire of burning coals, and there were fish on it and some bread. So when I was reading this, I found it very interesting that Simon put on his outer garment, and I found some reference to that said back in the olden days, in Jesus's time, that if you were going to a religious experience, it was required that you go there fully clothed. So a number of scholars, a number of people who study the Bible, think that the reason that Peter put on his coat was because he was going to meet with the Lord, which would be a religious experience. So even though he was going to jump in the water and have to swim in that 100 yards, he wanted to be properly dressed to receive the Lord. That's just an extra aside. Here's some more questions for you. What did Jesus tell them to do? He said, "Throw your net over the right side of the boat, and you will find some." And by some, we mean some fish there. And which disciple first recognized it was Jesus on the shore? John, the disciple whom Jesus loved. And what did Peter do? And remember, I explained this to you just a second ago. He put on his outer garment and jumped into the water. All right, and then this will wrap it up. This is John 21:10 through 14. Jesus said to them, "Bring some of the fish you have just caught." So Simon Peter climbed back into the boat and dragged the net ashore. It was full of large fish, 153. But even with so many, the net was not torn. Jesus said to them, "Come and have some breakfast." None of the disciples dared to ask, "Who are you?" They knew it was the Lord. Jesus came, took the bread, and gave it to them, and he did the same with the fish. This was now the third time Jesus appeared to his disciples after he was raised from the dead. All right, this is our final round of questions. How many fish were there in the net? Again, another math question. Sorry about that. 153. And how many times had Jesus appeared to the disciples after this appearance? So it says in the last bit of reading that we did there in the last verse that this was the third time that Jesus had appeared since he had been risen from the dead. I really thank you again for joining us for this Sunday school lesson. I hope that you enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed bringing it to you. I look forward to seeing all of you as soon as possible in person. But until then, I'm going to keep doing these lessons for you. And I want you all to have a great and wonderful week. And remember that I love you, and that Jesus loves you, and that our church loves you. And I just hope that you have a wonderful week.